thank you so much for joining us for this next portion of your virtual halfway there experience. So again, thank you all to everyone who was able to attend the opening plenary yesterday. If you were not able to attend or you weren't able to stay on for the entire session, in the email confirmation that you received today or yesterday for today's session, there should be a link to the YouTube recording of the session. So we do have that available if you weren't able to join us live. I also want to just kind of give an overview of how today's session will run. It'll be different than what we did yesterday. So this is the what we're calling the Central Hemisphere session. And so we're very excited to have esteemed scholars who will share with us today on our panels as well as in our roundtable sessions. So we'll begin this morning with a panel discussion with our scholars. We have Dr. Eleanor Flynn, Assistant Professor at London Business School, Dr. Alessandro Iorio at Bocconi University, Dr. Daniel Newark at HEC Paris, and Dr. Jost van der Breek at University of Groningen. And so I have some questions prepared based on the questions that you all, the students, submitted when you registered for this session. And so they're going to talk to us and answer those questions about how you can be successful in the second half of your PhD program. So since we've already kind of collected those questions from you all, I'll be the one asking the questions. But after we wrap up the panel session, then we'll move into the roundtable sessions. And so we'll have 2 rounds of roundtable discussions. Each of the virtual roundtables, which are just our breakout rooms, will be hosted by a different scholar. So our panelists will host tables as well as additional scholars that have volunteered to share their insights. And so we're asking that if you have any specific questions at this point, that you save them for the roundtables because everyone is there to share their insights and answer your questions about what you can be doing in the second half of your PhD program to be successful on the job market and ultimately in your career. So without further ado, I do believe we have all of our panelists here. So we will go ahead and get started. I think we're going to spotlight them so they will show up on the screen, I think. I'm not a Zoom expert, so we'll do our best. All right, so while they're coming, again, I just want to thank each of you for being here with us and for sharing your time and, of course, sharing your wisdom with all of us. We're really grateful and appreciative. All right, so the first question is pretty straightforward. What should students know at this stage? So just to kind of give an overview, most of the students here are somewhere in their second or third year of their program. Many have either completed coursework or they will be done with coursework soon. Some have done their comprehensive exams. So what should students at this stage know about their dissertation process? How should they be preparing for it? And what makes a strong dissertation? And we'll start with you, Eleanor.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here and to talk about this really important topic. So what I recall, so when I was in your position, or I guess in my third year, that was spring of 2020, which as we all know was a difficult time. And so on top of everything going on in the world, you also are faced with what I recall this very big adjustment of realizing you now have done all your coursework and the structured part of the PhD has now suddenly become incredibly unstructured. And so that's a really big adjustment. So I think kind of at a high level, and then I guess we may kind of go into more detail, and I'm sure the other panelists will want to add on to this, but I think both you need to kind of start to figure out how to impose structure on yourself and your work process, given that you now have a lot less of it. And then specifically with regards to preparing for the dissertation, Um, my general process and advice I got was to fairly early on, many, many months before you actually propose, to start generating lots of different ideas, like 6 to 10 different ideas. I would just kind of keep in my notes folder things that would in my phone, like things that would occur to me, and kind of come up with maybe a paragraph or two of a sort of pitch of a general idea and let those marinate over several weeks and then get feedback on them from your advisors and other people that you know kind of working in a similar area. And then over a couple of months, that kind of coalesced to stripping down to maybe two or possibly three ideas that seem to have more potential. And then I did a couple of brown bag presentations around them and got feedback from, again, other students, other faculty, and did some pilot data, and then eventually kind of settled on my topic. So I'll kind of stop there with that was my experience.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to add or anything that they did differently?
Well, I would say that, in my case, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. I would say that you guys are now in a very delicate phase of the PhD program, in the sense, at least based on my experience, you are right after qualifiers, so you feel you have accomplished something, but at the same time, you're not so close to the dissertation proposal phase. So what happened in my case is that I relaxed a bit too much in that program because I felt that I accomplished something. I didn't have the pressure yet of the proposal. So I think what you really need to be pay attention to is keep pushing with the momentum that you have accumulated with the qualifiers. Try to go, for example, what really helped me was sharing ideas, just as Eleanor said, with colleagues. Try to workshop your ideas, try to go to conferences to the extent that's possible, because that really actually helps you to flesh out your ideas that are in a very early stage. For example, Ellen or not about this, but for example, I attended the TADC conference. There was a conference in London organized by PhD students for PhD students. It really helped me to get in the mood about conference and sharing ideas. And then again, I would say it's very, very important to not being secretive of your ideas. Sometimes people tend to protect their ideas because they are afraid of being scooped. But actually, that's the opposite of what our field is about. Our field is about sharing ideas, engaging with others. So really, what's really difficult to do at the very beginning is sharing the ideas without feeling too protective of what you have realized. And I think that's very delicate, but it's very important. And I'll stop here.
Thank you. Anyone else? So just a follow up to this, and everyone. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Did you have something,
Oh,
Daniel?
please go ahead. I can jump in after.
I was going to ask just sort of a follow up to that. More specifically around like the logistics of completing a dissertation. What are the norms, either at your institution or in your region, around what a dissertation should look like? I know that I typically hear different perspectives. Some people say, you know, it needs to be enough for you to extract out 3 papers. Some people say it's just one really long paper with an expanded literature review section. Some people say it should be your sort of defining work. Others say, you know, get it done and get out. So, what are the different perspectives on dissertations where you are?
Yeah, maybe I can speak to that a little bit, and I think that also ties into what Eleanor and Alessandro were saying. So at least in my institution, I think it's sort of a 3 paper norm. That's sort of what we target, with maybe an introduction on the front end, tying things together a little bit more. Um, But I think along with what Eleanor and Alessandra were saying, starting to think in terms of maybe a little bit more tractability, paper-sized ideas. I think a lot of the first 2 years of PhD, they can be these really big ideas, which is great, but you're also swimming in all these ideas, and to start thinking sort of what is a paper-sized idea? And with what you were just saying, will this be a reflection of who I am? Will this be my embodiment? Obviously, you're going to live with it for a while. It should be important to you, but academic careers are long. You know a lot of things at this point. You might not be able to tie in every paper you love, every idea you love into this one all-encompassing kind of coherent thing. So, don't be afraid to say, this feels like a nice idea for a paper. I can work on that. Maybe here are 2 or 3 of them. maybe these other 5 or 6 that I generated, I can leave for when I'm an assistant professor, I can put in the drawer. So yes, it's a reflection of who you are to some extent, but it's not going to reflect everything you know, everything you're interested in, everything you want to say to the world kind of all at once.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, so one thing that I would like to add. So, first of all, thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay, by the way? I have new headphones. I
Yes.
have no idea if they're working. Okay, that's great. So one thing that I can add is that it is where I'm from, but I think in general, just incredibly important to pick the right topic. So yes, it's all about your ideas, but yeah, I guess it's more a series of ideas centered around a certain topic that you find interesting, but also that is novel, where you can add something. Because yeah, it can be career defining if you pick the right topic and you have the right data to test cool and novel ideas that everyone's interested in and that is relevant for management, for practice. And that can be pretty difficult to figure out. So also ask for advice also in that regard, I would say, around you and from your advisors.
Yeah. And just speaking back on that, right? Some people say your dissertation is your entry ticket to the field, right? And some people may be fair of this. Some people say, okay, you really have this grand idea and really execute and extend our understanding of a topic. But actually, to me, a clear research questions but a very clean execution is better than a grand idea with messy design and messy data. As Daniel was saying, right, at the end of the day, right, you want to have paper out potentially out of this. So sometimes you're like narrowing down to a very specific phenomena or mechanisms that you feel you can investigate, right, and have good data and a good design to transform that into a paper is way better than having this super great idea that are very difficult to test. Because at the end of the day, right, we want to be able to have these outside in some outlets and people be able to read what we produce. So there are different perspectives, right? Some schools say you should have like this very broad research project, but sometimes also like clear research question and clear data is the way to go. At least that was my experience. I also had the 3 essays type of structure. So all of the 3 papers are likely now published. So I think it's very nice to have that structure. I think that's my experience.
And
Yeah. Sorry.
go ahead, Eleanor.
I was just going to quickly kind of add on to what Alessandro was saying. So in my program, it was very idiosyncratic to the advisor. So there were some people whose advisors were like, you can have research projects that are already in progress that'll be part of your dissertation. My advisor said, you're going to have a new project. There's no data yet, no work in progress. It's totally new. And your goal should be like a paper that gets into AMJ. She was like 1 paper in a top journal. That should be the goal. So I agree. I think that the ideal would be 2 or 3 papers that all have the potential to get into a top journal. This is again, assuming, taking for granted everyone's trying to go on the academic job market to be at a research intensive institution. If not, then very different. But you know, I wish I felt like I wrote this long dissertation that then had to just be cut down so significantly to 1 main paper. And it ended up being a good paper, but I do think having multiple papers is better. But to Alessandro's point, if you have to err on the side of doing one thing really well that has high potential versus really broad and kind of messier and none of them end up in a great place, then maybe err on the side of not trying to do too much.
I can add. So first of all, I completely agree with that. So focused on I think what in American institutes you would call your job market paper or something like that. So one publication that you're really excited about and that you think has a lot of potential. To add to that, it depends a little bit on the system that you are in. So I am in the Dutch system, and here we start with a dissertation right away. So you have 4 years for your dissertation, and then maybe you can focus on at least 2 papers. So you have more time, for example, for data collection. So you can potentially collect data for 2 or maybe 3 great projects. But then even then, I would still focus on the core project that you're most excited about, because it takes a long time and it only is taking longer, I have the feeling, to publish in high quality research.
Yeah, and maybe just to add, I think as a generalization in my experience, having seen PhD students now for, I guess, about a decade, I think papers are usually narrower than you might think, at least at this point. I think, so the bad news is that maybe that sounds, overly specific, or can you fill out a paper? The good news is that that paper idea you might have in your head now might actually be 2 or 3 papers already. So really kind of checking with your advisor and having conversations and understanding what is the scope of each paper, but with the understanding that it might have to be funneled down a little bit or narrowed down a little bit.
Thank you. And it's something I just want to raise. I appreciate the discussion we just had about all of the different sort of like norms and ways of approaching a dissertation. So one takeaway that I got from that for students at this stage is making sure you have a clear understanding of the norms in your particular system, in your department or institution, and the norms that your advisor or your dissertation committee chair adheres to make sure that your dissertation process goes smoothly so that you're not surprised by anything. So I think even whether you're beginning in your first year or somewhere in your third year to work on your dissertation, just making sure you sit down and have that conversation to make sure you understand, what you should be doing. But one thing that I heard in common across all 4 of you is this idea that the dissertation is not just this big project that you want to have completed, but something that ultimately should turn into 1, 2, 3 or more publishable papers for you. So kind of keeping an eye to the future, because sometimes I think as you're in it, it can just feel like I need to get this one thing done and out of the way, but you're really trying to set yourself up on sort of an academic foundation. So we already started to mention the next topic a little bit, which is the job market. And, I know that the job market is a term that we kind of use generally, but job markets look very different in different regions. And depending on the type of institution that you're looking for, whether you're looking for research intensive, teaching focused, or balanced. And so, from your own experiences, can you talk us through the logistics of preparing for the job market, for a student who's at the halfway point, who may not even understand all of the terminology, who's involved, what's supposed to happen, how long does it take, what materials did you need? Can you just kind of give a bird's eye view to students about what is this job market thing and what should they be thinking about it now? And we can start with you, Alessandra.
Yeah, so my experience usually, of course, like the academic job market is set to start close to the academy, right? The academy is the very first chance in which you have a chance to sell yourself as a scholar and as an academic. So I would say you really want to have a very, very good draft of your job market paper by, say, June or July, so way before the academy, such that you can have that, and then you can keep on adding studies or other things later on. But you need to have that first draft. At least in my experience, was very helpful to have that before the academy. And then at academy, usually what is really helpful to do is, for example, try to organize a PDW or a symposium in your job market year. For example, in my case, I was studying social networks. I organized a symposium and I was able to invite people that I really admired to be part of the symposium. So that's a chance for you to get to know them in the context of accomplishing something. Because if you send an email to a scholar you admire, say, hey, I really like your work, I would like to meet you, usually that doesn't lead to follow-ups. But if you invite them in the context of something you organize, that's going to give you a platform to get to know better and to build that relationship. You can do that actually even before your job market year. Let's say in your 4th year, depending on how long is your program, right? 1 year before you go onto the market. And then my advice when you are at academy, just also try to meet people. Don't try to overschedule. A lot of people have their schedule full. There's no space for editing. Leave some space for serendipity, for meetings that you may have randomly with other people. And for example, in my institution, right, we tend to have informal meetings also at academy. There are some candidates, they reach out to us because they want to meet with us. We are more than welcome to have a chance to meet them and to tell what we are looking for. So I guess my advice is try to be proactive in academy, also outside of this formal session in which you present papers, which are useful, but I guess you want to go the extra mile and being proactive, putting together sessions, meeting with people. Don't be afraid of emailing scholars to do that. So that's my advice.
Yeah, any additional points or any other things about the job market process others like to highlight?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I will kind of jumping off of from post academy. Well, actually, I might have a recommendation of something that you guys could start doing now before the job market, which is admittedly intimidating, but I actually think is useful. A junior faculty member in my PhD program did in a lab meeting kind of put us through a realistic preview of what CVs look like of candidates on the job market that our institution evaluates. And so the purpose of that was a lot of people that had been on the long list over the recent years at NYU where I was. And so for all of us PhD students, we got to see the research statements and the CVs of people who had been considered. And it was quite intimidating, but I think it's actually quite important and useful. I mean, there's a balance, but I sometimes think because, again, publications take so long and the way time moves in the PhD program, sometimes you get to your dissertation and the year before you go on the job market and you all of a sudden realize, oh my gosh, things haven't quite hit as fast as I expected. And I just think if you already have some sense of the type of institution you might want to go to, whether it's more balanced, whether it's more research focused, whether it's more teaching focused, and or you have some sort of location preferences, look at and get a sense of what do the CVs of the people who have very recently been hired off the job market at those places, what do they look like? And admittedly, it's a small sample. There's a lot of noise in this job market process, but I just think using that and then trying to come up with a timeline of working back for yourself of kind of like, okay, if my goal is to have a paper that has an R&R at a top journal or one publication at a top journal, which I will tell you at a research institution, R1 institution is kind of viewed as this sort of threshold of what people are looking for to look at candidates seriously. Again, I can't speak to, it's different if it's a more balanced institution. So if that's the goal for you, then kind of saying, okay, let's kind of work back. It takes however many months if something is under review. And then if it doesn't get rejected, however many, just kind of give for yourself some sort of sense of, okay, with that in mind, I should be aiming to try and submit something, at this point early on in the year before you're even going on the job market. So that's my 2 cents on that. And then the other thing I would say is then and then I'll let others kind of chime in at other parts of the process. But in terms of deadlines and materials, you're going to be needing to gather or put together a research statement about your research identity as it's emerging at this time, and the projects that are furthest along, and kind of positioning yourself. And this is very important because in hiring committees, people are trying to make categorical judgments about, is this someone that's a negotiation scholar or a diversity scholar? And so having some clarity and coherence as much as you can around what you think you're interested in and the kind of main areas you're trying to contribute to is a goal of your research statement, and to make that compelling and clear. And then a teaching statement. So any experience you have teaching evaluations, your kind of philosophy of teaching, which, let's be honest, at this point is like sort of a joke, but like does have to somehow be kind of put together. There used to be, when I was on the market, there was also a diversity statement for US institutions. I imagine a lot of that has changed. And let's see, and then cover letters for the schools, and the deadlines. You need the first deadlines, again, depending on the institutions, tend to be, some deadlines are end of July. But then I'd say the bulk of them, again, for more research oriented institutions, is going to be around end of August, September. And so again, before AOM, you'd want to have drafts of these things.
Yeah. And one small piece of advice here: do not underestimate the amount of time that people need to craft your reference letters. Sometimes even there are professors that may be very busy. So I would like, try the best that you can to reach out to them in advance saying, look, I'm thinking to apply for this school. Would you be willing to craft a reference letter for me ahead of time, so that you give them enough time to write a strong letter about yourself. So I think that's also important to think about. And also, like, try to pick somebody that knows your work quite well. Of course, your advisor is going to be one of your letter writer, but try to pick other people that may speak closely about what you're doing. Sometimes people just aim for high status people. They may know very little about what you're doing. And then the reference letter is coming out of that is probably not as strong as possible, because they don't know you that well. So also consider the timing, the logistic timing for that point as well, which doesn't depend on you, it depends on other people.
I kind of want to piggyback on this question, because we've gotten it in previous years at Halfway There around this idea of like letters of recommendation. And I think it's an important point to kind of delve into at this stage, because you kind of can't wait until you are ready to go on the job market to start considering, seriously considering like who letter writers might be, right? I think that's something that you really do think about early on, because part of the, like, to your point, Alessandro, is you want someone who actually is familiar with you and your work, and who can really write a strong letter for you, and that wouldn't come overnight. So like what are some tips that students can start implementing now around thinking about building relationships that they can ultimately leverage at this stage, the job market stage of the process?
It's a great question. I've struggled with that myself for a little bit, or always wondered about it, I should say, how to do that. So ideally, strong and good relationships, they come naturally. Like, you have an idea and you reach out to people who are both available but also have expertise. And sometimes you have to look for a while to find a good co-author and collaborator. And yeah, it can be difficult to make good judgments on that. But well, you have time to establish relationships, and it's definitely important. And once you have found these people, ask them for a recommendation letter when you need that. Ideally, it's someone with expertise in the topic that you're interested in, for example, so they can vouch for you, that you are truly an expert, becoming an expert in this area, for example. That's one piece of advice that I always give.
Thank you. Any additional advice or insight?
I wanted to just add also on the materials that it was very useful to me to see examples from students who had already gone on the market a few years ahead. And so I would really recommend to you to ask students that have recently been on the job market, or who are going on the, like, for example, this year, any students that are in your program are going on the job market, see if, maybe after they get through the job market, they are willing to share their materials, just to kind of see templates and examples, because it feels very like, what is this supposed to look like? And so I would try to get a few examples to get a feel of kind of what they look like, and what sort of different styles there are to model off of. And then I think the only other thing that we didn't mention is that, again, depending in the applications, schools often will ask for any papers you have. So published papers, working papers. So you should also be thinking about at least 1 or 2 papers that, again, are like your job market paper and maybe something else that kind of represents your research identity to be able to send at the time of applying.
So another question that came up is thinking back to your own process when you were, about halfway through your PhD program, going into that second half. What are some common mistakes that PhD students make in the second half of the PhD program, or even some things that you wish that you may have done differently that could have helped set you up as you were moving into your first assistant professor role? And we will start with Daniel.
So I think that the one that comes to mind for me first is the one I already discussed a little bit, which is just this difficulty of letting go of sort of, it's hard to close doors. You have all these identities, all these interests, and maybe holding on to too many too long is, I think, one that that I've seen. Yeah, I think also, it's hard to not be anxious to some extent. I understand that, but people get through it, you will get through it. So sort of trusting in that process a little bit, realizing that you do have people most likely looking out for you, making sure you're doing okay. Not disappearing, I think that's an important one, right? Advisor styles are different. If you have an advisor that you sort of need to knock on their door more than they're going to be coming after you, make sure you do that. Even people, maybe you haven't taken a class with them in a year or two, but you'd like to have a conversation. I think people, especially at your institution, don't be afraid to reach out and not disappear. Yeah, and then also some of the things we were just talking about, I think if you get those materials from someone who just went on the job market, you might be struck by how polished they are, how coherent they are. I think a lot of that comes fairly late. I think to some extent, the sort of research statement and the cover letter, it's a little bit of a creative writing project, right? You sort of look back at the last 5 years and say, this is how everything fits together. And this is how, this is completely my theme. Not for everyone. For some people, it was there all along. But if you feel it's not there yet or not that sharp yet, that often comes a little bit later, and sometimes even in the writing.
Maybe another mistake to avoid, don't wait too long to start collecting data. Of course, this is a function of the type of research that you do, right? Qualitative, quantitative. For example, in my case, I was collecting some data in the field with a company, and it took me more than 1 year to convince the lawyers of the company to get the performance evaluation data of the people I was interested in, right? So sometimes there are setbacks, there are complications, and you need to factor that in as you approach your dissertation. So to the extent that's possible, right, try to start the process of securing your data as quickly as possible. Of course, depends if you do experiments online, that's not so much of an issue, but to the extent to which your data depends on someone else, on some company or some qualitative interviews, try to start the process quickly because there are a lot of complications in that.
Anything else to add to that? Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was, but I'm curious to hear what other people think. What I always advise PhD students is to limit the number of projects that you work on, and overall just the number of activities. And I know that like doing extra reviews, starting side projects, or starting just new projects on your own is very tempting. It may help you to build a strong resume, or you may think that, hey, at least one of these papers may end up in a top journal. But I always advise people to focus on a limited number of research projects, especially the one that you and others think are very good, and try to make sure that these get published in good journals. Because if you do too many things at once, especially if you lack some experience, it can be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just add what I said at the beginning about coming up with ways to impose some structure on yourself and accountability for getting things done, given that, yeah, it can be pretty abrupt where all of a sudden you have all this free time and it seems great, but then you realize it's hard to kind of can be hard to kind of stay focused and be productive. So I think everything from, setting a schedule, like look at the start of the week, looking at, okay, what do I want to get done this week? And really kind of blocking out what you're going to work on different days, as opposed to just, because again, when you're taking classes, you just wake up and, I have to go to this class and it has this assignment, but now you have to be in control of kind of prioritizing your schedule. And so really kind of slotting in what you're working on different days and at different times. Things like also getting a sense of when do you work best. I think experimenting with, I realized for writing and anything that's really kind of deep concentrated work, I do much better in the morning. And so whereas it's easy for me to do data analysis or things that aren't as intensive in a different way as writing, later in the afternoon, in the evening. And so just really being kind of thoughtful about understanding how you work best. Do you work best at home for certain things, in the office? And just trying to kind of create more structure to kind of optimize, your time.
Thank you. So we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the dissertation process, what students should be thinking about right now as they enter the second half. We've talked about the job market. We even got a little bit into some things that students can be doing now to make themselves more successful or more effective on the job market. And then just kind of went through some of the common mistakes or things that they can do or avoid doing to set themselves up. So now, as we're thinking towards this year's AOM, what can students be doing at this AOM? So I know Alessandro gave us some great tips in general on your job market year, but what can they be doing this year as they're headed into AOM to start laying a strong foundation for themselves?
Yeah, thank you. I actually think it's a difficult question. So I personally try not to think of these things too much. I just go to the conference, do lots of different things that you find interesting and enjoyable. So definitely don't stay in your room. Go out there, and then, in my experience at least, the things come naturally. You run into people. Just you go to presentations you find interesting. You ask a question. Maybe link that to some data that you have or an idea, and all of a sudden an interesting collaboration may or may not emerge. So things like that. So yeah, just get yourself out there, and things happen naturally. Things may very well happen naturally. Something like that. So put yourself out there. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, I think one, don't stay in your room. Don't avoid the conference, even though being Copenhagen, lots of things to do. Attend some sessions and get that face time. And like you said, serendipitous things can happen if you're in places that you find
Yeah.
enjoyable.
I think every year there is a party calendar pops up at some point. Try to get a hold of that. It's an Excel spreadsheet with all the parties and things that are organized. Try to get that, and you can make it work.
I feel also attending PDWs is nice. These professional development workshops, they are usually centered on a specific topic. So find a PDW that you feel you belong to and go there, because you can spend 4 or 5 hours with the same scholars. It's a chance for you to get to know them better. So again, try to meet people in the context of accomplish something. So PDWs are very good. A symposium, as I mentioned, I think I would just skim that program right now. We still have some time, and find the sessions that are closer to what you're doing and put them in your schedule. So it's gonna give you some structure, going back to Eleanor as well.
Yeah, and I think I mean, similar along these lines, like part of what these conferences are useful for is you're trying to find who is going to be kind of your community in the field as you move forward. And, in your PhD program, there may be a couple other people that are researching similar topics as you, but it's probably only a couple, and then there may not be. And so what you're trying to do is kind of identify who are similar people, I mean, at different stages, but what's most helpful is people at a similar stage as you, PhD students, and maybe a little bit further ahead, who you think are going to be, you know, potential future collaborators and people whose work you're going to be interested in. And then also ideally, some people that you just want to be friends with and are going to be, you know, socially relationships that you want to develop over time. And again, like when I was halfway through my PhD, it was the lost COVID years. And so I really felt when I went on the market that aware that like I did not know as many people that were my year. And I didn't have that same kind of sense of community clearly kind of formed going on the market that would have been nice to have. So, because yeah, these are again people that our careers are long, and just getting to know as many people as you can, I think is kind of what these conferences are largely about.
And I think what Eleanor said before about figuring out the best way you work to get work done, I think that applies to every part of this process, sort of figuring out what feels good to you. So if you like sort of being strategic and social and more intentional with your networking, AOM can be that. If you want to make it about the sessions and the content and try to find yourself in a handful of really good, you know, meaningful conversations about work, it can be that as well. Always, I think there's some, you know, some basic level, like they said, leave your room. That's probably important. If you're really on the introvert side, you maybe need to push a little bit, but I think there are a lot of different ways to do AOM, and a lot of different ways it ends up being rewarding for people. So also figuring out what works best for you.
Thank you. I love that kind of recap, because I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not cool enough to have access to the Excel sheet with all the parties. So I'm somewhere in the middle. So I think that's really, really great that, like, you know, everyone came from a different perspective, but ultimately step one is get out of your room and make sure that you're taking advantage of some aspect of the opportunities there at the conference. All right, so one other thing that we just wanted to highlight briefly as well is, are there other conferences that students should potentially consider or think about? I think Alessandro mentioned one earlier on, but are there other opportunities for students to connect with people at their same stage or even more senior scholars?
Another conference that comes to mind is EGOS, European Group for Organization Studies. The structure of the conference is a bit different for the academy in the sense that it's divided in tracks, and you spend 3 days with the same people talking about research. So it's a chance to build stronger ties with the community as opposed to AOM, where you are sessions that shift and change every time. Now, the conference is usually around July. So this year, for example, is going to be in Athens in Greece at the beginning of July. So that's definitely a very good conference to go to. And then there are a lot of specialized conferences. For example, in my field, there's a conference about networks, much smaller in size. So every field then has a smaller conference that take place throughout the year. And then probably your advisor is a good person to ask to for conferences they should attend.
Thank you. Any others?
Yeah. So what I recommend and also do myself and enjoy a lot is so definitely go to AOM. There's something for everyone there, and then combine that with a more field specific, smaller conference. So there's conferences on leadership. I do teams. I go to in-group. It's great. It's an amazing conference. So there you have. So that's much smaller, like 100 or 200 people. You all set together, and then you meet people working on the same area as you. So that has value as well. And then if you want to do a third one, maybe go to a local conference or something smaller, which is beneficial for other reasons, to build your local network, for example. I do that too in the Netherlands, for example, or in Germany. Yeah.
And then sometimes, depending on your institution, you may apply for travel funds. For example, at CMU, there was a grant every year just devoted for people to attend conference. You apply to the grant, and then you can get it eventually. So sometimes, it can be like a lot of money to travel for conferences, to the extent to which you can get support from your institutions, your group, your advisor. Try to take advantage of that. Sometimes these things are difficult to find, but if you ask around, there are a lot of resources that you can use.
Yeah, I want to second that I think going to a smaller conference is nicer. It's less intimidating and overwhelming. It's often more, because it's more focused, there's going to be a higher percentage of things that are of interest and relevance to your research. I've heard in-group is great. I also like IACM, where it's International Association for Conflict Management, very broadly defined. So everything from negotiations to actual geopolitical conflicts to diversity and intergroup relations. And Alessandro mentioned TADC that we host at London Business School. That's PhD student only. Also NYU and Columbia host an East Coast doctoral conference, which I think going to PhD oriented conferences too, where it's lower pressure. And that's again, another way to kind of get to know the community of other students at other schools in your area. And I'm sure there are other regional ones. I'm just familiar with those because of where I went to school.
Any others? Thank you. This is helpful. I wish I would have known this. This is helpful. All right. So as we're kind of getting close to wrapping up, we have a session that we like to do where I'll pose a question to you and each of you will answer. We'll just go in rounds, but you can only answer with one or two words, really one word, but we're academics, so we're giving two words. So I'm going to start and I'll just pose the question and we'll start with Daniel, and then whoever jumps out, but one word, no more than two to answer the question. All right, so first question, what is your favorite place to write?
Home.
Okay. Alessandra?
Home.
Eleanor?
Home.
Yeah.
Just
Yes, at home.
home. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, what's your second favorite place to write? Same order.
Different room in the same home. I don't know. It's not in the office.
By a
I love
window with a view. I think lighting and view is important.
Okay. Same for me. Lighting is important. Okay. All right. So next question, and this time we'll start off with Alessandro. Most prominent emotion you felt while working on your dissertation?
Oof. A lot of emotions, but I guess the prominent was I had fun. It was fun. It was a fun experience.
That's awesome. Okay. Just
Excitement. I enjoyed it quite a lot actually. Yeah.
very good. Eleanor?
Not an emotion, but like curiosity. I always felt very, motivated, curious.
Excellent. Daniel?
Yeah, I think excitement as well for me.
Very good. I love that everyone had a positively balanced word because you often hear a lot of like dread and anxiety around the dissertation process. So I love that. All right. Next one, we'll start with Eleanor. One not so obvious item that is a must pack in your job market suitcase.
Ooh. Stain removal pen.
Oh, yes. Very good. Daniel?
Running shoes.
Okay. Alessandra?
Yeah, I would say running as well. Running shoes.
Okay.
I didn't hear the question. What was the question?
Oh, sorry. One not so obvious item that is a must pack in your job market suitcase.
I know deodorant. I don't know something.
Yes.
Maybe that's obvious though. Yeah.
All right. And then we'll start with Daniel again. What keeps you excited about your academic career?
Flexibility.
Very good. Alessandra?
Freedom, intellectual freedom. Yeah.
Okay. Joseph?
New projects.
Okay. And Eleanor?
Yeah, autonomy. That's what it's, yeah.
Love that. All right, a lot of consistency. All right, and then one more. What is the most important thing students can do between now and their job market? 1 to 2 words.
Do,
Alessandra, you look you're ready.
do good work. That's it. Just put in the hours, do good work.
All right. Anyone can jump in if you have your word.
Right. Just right. Rewrite.
Focus on the work.
Okay,
Yeah, work hard, publish. Yeah,
there you
difficult.
go. All right, very good. Any last thoughts, anything that we haven't touched on that you think is super important that our students should know right now as they're moving into that second half of PhD or even thinking beyond that?
Mhm.
Last thing I wanted to say is just to really be careful with the social comparison. You might have these Google Docs going around telling you how everyone's doing. You might hear from people in your institution. It's a very, very noisy process. People are using different methods. People are applying different places. Having been on the other side now, the hiring side, you know, I imagine this will be bittersweet to hear. A lot of it's not about you. Sometimes, we're hiring macro and you're micro or vice versa. Sometimes they're internal things. So it's good that you're preparing. It's good that you're focusing on what you can control, but it is a noisy kind of long process that has a lot of moving parts. And so to not try to get too caught up in that side would be the last thing I'd say.
Yeah, totally agree.
Thank you. Anyone else? I think that's a perfect way to end this panel. Thank you all so much for sharing all of your wisdom, your insights, and even some of your own personal experiences. We really appreciate it. And I know that the students have a lot of things to consider and implement into their own academic journey and their own plans. So thank you again for sharing your time and for being here with us. I think we have a bit of time to do, I'm going to steal this from Ben yesterday, a little bit of a stretch break before we move into our roundtables. So just, however you need to stretch, you can turn on your cameras as well, stretch a little bit, and get ready for the roundtables. And Ben is going to come and give us instructions about how we'll do that. So thank you all again.
Hello, everyone. I hope you had a great 2 rounds of your breakout sessions. I'm here to wrap us up for the session. But first, I wanted to take a moment to once again thank all of our panelists and our breakout room hosts for giving their time, their effort, their insights to everything. We are so appreciative of them. So quick, virtual round of applause. Thank you to everyone for that. I know I was appreciative when I did this type of session, and I imagine the breakout rooms were also good. So with that, we will wrap up today's session. I do want to highlight, we had previewed this during the plenary session, but we were able to secure a larger space for the in-person networking for any of those who are joining AOM in person. And so you can see the details of the room here, which we will share via email after everything's wrapped up. But there are no restrictions on who can join. So if you've registered and you want to join in person, make sure you come on by. It'll be a great time. We're gonna have light refreshments provided, so lemonade, tea, snacks, fruit, veggies, cookies, all that type of good stuff. So we are really excited and thankful to the OB division or the MCC, I'm not sure exactly who granted us the approval, but for letting us do a larger in-person session. So please make sure to come on by if you are in Copenhagen. So with that, I will bid you adieu. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. But thanks again, and we will see you in Copenhagen, hopefully. All right, bye,
And
everyone.
one final plug to do the feedback survey if you have not
Yeah.
yet done that. We would really appreciate any and all thoughts you have.